We are live.
All right.
Ooh.
It's been a long time, too. We haven't been live for, well, we've been alive, but we haven't been online
Online for a
for, I
while.
don't know, almost 6 weeks.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I've been on the road and had an interesting, just I led a retreat in Indiana and I led another retreat in Ann Arbor, or just outside of Ann Arbor, and did some teaching in Cleveland and visited friends. And now I'm back in Chicago. So,
That's good. So.
Yeah.
Nice to be back home.
And the weather is finally turning beautiful. So
good. Yeah. Chicago's great. I love Chicago.
Yeah. Not quite feeling like home, but it'll get there maybe.
I don't think so.
So anyway, I guess we should actually officially start for the audio.
Yeah, well, I might as well just go with what we're going.
Okay.
Might as well. Right. We're talking about social media and sensory overload and how to deal with it, and
Oh, is that what we're talking about? Okay, I thought we were talking about the senses in general, but that's sensory overload, all of it.
I mean,
how to work with it.
Yeah, how to work with it, and guarding the sense doors is one topic I think we were gonna touch on. Which, I mean, we're bombarded by social media nowadays. I think all of us.
Yeah.
And it's stuff that's tailored to rile up our emotions and anger and greed and desire and all kinds of things in ways that are not necessarily the healthiest. So I think it's something we all have to deal with.
Yeah. And I made the mistake yesterday morning. I got up very early, and I don't know why, but I went to my phone and I went to the New York Times app, and the first thing I saw was, the thing about Chinese student visas. And I had just come the night before. I was at I'm part of one of the Zen Sanghas here on the campus at the university. And probably it was a little social gathering, and at least only four of the people, two of them were from China. Two of them were from Taiwan, I think. Or maybe not. Maybe they were all from China. And in the fall, most of my class was, 2/3 of my class were Chinese. And it's like, what the hell? It's just like that. Anyway, the point is, I should never have looked at the New York Times at 5:30 in the morning, because it really set me off. I was so angry.
Yeah.
And, it's not that anger is a bad thing when it's like that, but you have to like recognize how easily it triggers everything else. And so, when we're talking about social media and the sense of, social media is really feeding into the sense of thought and fabrications, and then they know, because of their algorithms, they know our sense of thought, or it knows our sense of thoughts, and that's a scary thought. I don't think the Buddha realized that when he was like teaching in 2,500 years ago, that there would be, although he knew, he could tell what somebody's thoughts were, but that's a little different, and so we need, that's one sense door we really need to recognize what's happening.
Yeah. Well, and these algorithms are they're designed to hijack our attention and keep our attention. I mean, that's the whole point of social media, is to keep you, is to grab your attention and keep it on the same site, by learning the sorts of posts and information that basically keeps you involved. And what that ends up doing, I mean, just as a matter of course, is to get you riled up in one way, emotionally or another, because it's these strong emotions that keep you involved. And so, I mean, speaking for myself, I know, having, spent time doom scrolling or whatever you call it, over, it's like, you begin, and there's an article or two that's interesting, and maybe one that makes you a little bit angry, or maybe one that makes you think, oh, I wouldn't mind buying that, or whatever, whatever it happens to be. But then after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it's like your mind is scattered and unfocused and
Right.
unpliable, whatever the opposite are that of the words that the Buddha would use for the well focused mind. I mean, it's just the
Yeah.
opposite. It's just blown away, and you're not able to to deal with the world anymore in a good sense. You've got to
Yeah.
learn to, or I find that I have to learn to limit, or even just turn some of them off. I mean, I did that with TikTok years ago. I mean, TikTok was just too much. I would, just like,
I've never
scroll.
bothered. I've never bothered.
Yeah, it
And
was.
even Facebook. Facebook, I barely am on, and what comes up on my Facebook feed now is totally bizarre. I don't know how it happened, but
it probably has no idea what you want. So
exactly. So, but I think it might be worth sort of backtracking a bit and just kind of talking about the sense doors in general, and how obviously we need them and we want them, and it the sense doors give us a sense of enjoyment of life to some degree, hopefully. And the Buddha wasn't suggesting we get rid of our sense doors, but rather how are we relating to our sense doors? And obviously, when we are meditating, we are shutting off at least potentially one sense door, but we're aware of the senses, and what he really highlighted was how quickly we take a sense, some object that we are experiencing, whether it's through one of the sense doors, and fabricate so much more stuff around that. And so, how do we practice with the sense doors in an effective way?
Yeah.
And I because they're actually very useful when it comes to practice. And if we are able to just see or just hear or and recognize the difference between seeing and looking and hearing and listening. I don't know what the appropriate verbs are for smell. Versus sort of actively going afterwards, versus just receiving the smell. There's something that shifts in that practice, and so that's a very interesting place to kind of explore, I find.
Yeah, and to I think, I mean, part of at least what I find myself doing in mindfulness meditation is paying attention to the causal influences of whatever the senses, the objects of my senses are at the time. I hear some sort of sound. What kind of effect does that sound have on me psychologically during the meditation? Does it, if I hear a beautiful bird song, it's this desire to have it continue, that I see, I want to hear it again. What is that bird? What is that sound? What is that, or if somebody's making a noise outside, the person is mowing the lawn next door, it's, it's the feeling of, let's, I wish that would end, maybe he'll take his mower up to the other side of the lawn so it won't be quite so noisy. Those kinds of thoughts that arise in the mind, and the way that they condition certain kinds of emotional tones to the mind at that time. So you see the sort of development out of this kind of mental proliferation, as you were talking about, really mental proliferation sort of arising out of the impact of all this stuff on just hearing, just the hearing sense. And of course, there's other senses as well during meditation.
Sure. I find it. I remember once in some class I was teaching. It was while I was still in New York, and uh, I don't know. There was a clanging of a radiator near a campsite, and at the end of the meditation, somebody was really annoyed by it. And I said, "Isn't it? It's really interesting how, like, when it's a mechanical sound, we have one reaction. When it's a natural sound, we have another reaction, and it's all just sound."
Yep.
And so, you hear bird songs, and of course, that has a pleasant response generally, um, and it can just stop there. It could just stop at the pleasant response, but of course, I know you guys, because of where you live, you sort of pay attention to the birds, and your bird songs, and so it's like, the bird song arises, and then there's the naming of the bird song, and then there's the last story of the last time you heard that bird song from that, and so this is like where the proliferation starts.
Yeah.
And it's not like that's a horrible thing. It's just, the recognition of it while it's happening is actually quite astonishing.
Yeah.
And the moment you sort of see it happening, it's like, oh, wait a minute, let me just come back to the sound itself.
Right. And in the case of, like you were saying, in the case of bird song or even just a banging radiator,
Yeah,
it's minor enough. It's not a big deal. I mean, somebody can be annoyed by a radiator, but at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. But the point is I mean, for me anyway, is to be aware that this is the same general process that happens when we, for instance, get sucked into social media,
sure.
and then as we were talking about, the mind gets messed up for the rest of the day because of something that or some doom scrolling we've gone through, or whatever, seeing some headline in the newspaper. And that's a more concerning syndrome, because
Yeah,
it really can set you up badly for a long period of time, and make you more unskillful in your reactions to other people during the day. I mean, I've found this myself. I read some headline, and I find myself getting annoyed with just random people, and not
yeah,
because it's their fault or anything. It's just because of the state of my own mind,
sure.
being annoyed at the world. I become more testy and difficult, and that's not good.
Right. But this is an interesting one. There are two things that came up as you were saying that. The first thing is, I don't know why I just can't realize this, but of course it's true. Like the way the internet works and the way social media works, right? It's the externalization of our own proliferation.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, because
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
you read one thing and you click on something else, and then and like 30 minutes later, you forgot what you started out with.
yeah.
And the same thing is true with, that's how our minds work. So it's like, oh, they figured that out, and we're all screwed basically.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, and this is where actually the senses can be really helpful in talking about what you were just talking about, which is how, it can affect your mood and ruin the rest of your day. At the same time, if that happens, it's like, okay, let me stop. Let me actually go out for a walk and open to my senses fully, just as they are,
Yeah.
whatever is arising. And that can actually settle the body. And so I know when I'm guiding, when I'm working with someone, if they are really stuck in something, I will suggest, okay, just open your eyes and look around. What else is here?
Mm-hmm.
And and allow that uh, just the act of opening to the senses to help settle the body a bit. So that there are two sides to this. It's
Yeah.
like using the sense doors effectively, and um, not letting them carry us off somewhere else, but just being present with what's actually here
Mm-hmm.
in the seeing realm, in the hearing realm, in the etc. Um,
No, I mean, that's a very skillful way, I think, to help. I mean, in a sense, distract. I mean, in a good way. distract the mind from something that is unhealthy, which is this proliferation around some thought or idea or worry or whatever it might be, distract it with a focus on the more potentially powerful and meaningful sense data that's on around us right now.
Right.
And that helps to, and that can help to calm in a healthy way.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call it distraction. It's like that sutta where the Buddha talks about replacing a bad thought with a good thought.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really that.
I think of that as a distraction. I mean, it's just a different. I mean, it's turning the mind
from
redirection. Another
redirection.
Yeah, redirection.
Mm-hmm. And it can even be helpful within a meditation itself to recall something like that, to recall in a moment, where the mind is just going wild, to recall an experience, a sensory experience that actually can do that. It can help settle the body and settle the mind. Mm-hmm. It's a little more challenging because we can also then get carried away with the fantasy of that. So, but sometimes that recollection can be really useful.
Yeah, well, then that's, I mean, in a certain sense, that's the heart of mindfulness of breathing, right? Where you're bringing the mind back to the breath, and the breath is the thing that stabilizes and calms.
And breath is a sensory experience.
Yeah, exactly.
As well as it's a physical experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's really, I mean, this is key to our practice because it's all about name and form in a sense. We see an object that gets named, and then formations start to happen around that name. And to some degree, what happens when we are having a sensory experience is that the mind jumps in, the habitual mind jumps in so quickly and names whatever it is we're seeing that some would say we're not even seeing what we're seeing the name. The name itself is bringing an image to mind. And so we think we are seeing something, but we're not actually fully seeing it. That makes sense.
We're seeing some concept of it or some memory of a bunch of past experiences with the thing. And
or there's the famous, line, I forget what sutta it's in, where, the Buddha or the person thinks they're seeing a snake, but it's just a rope, that's been twirled up on the road, because the mind leaps ahead. And maybe it's a good thing that you think you're seeing a snake, even if it's not a snake, because then, you have an appropriate response. But so these are all such fascinating places to explore. And I like to it's funny, this is something I use a lot in often with retreats when people do walking practice outside, is that I'll suggest that they start just with the sense of contact, right? Their feet on the ground, and just being with that sense, and then consciously change to hearing. And so you're just hearing. And this, of course, goes back to the Bahia Sutta, just in the hearing, there's only the hearing. And then, switching to the next. I mean, it's funny, I've been doing that for a long time. And then when I was on retreat with my teachers, they were saying that when they were in the monastery, I forget what well-known teacher came and said, go out and walk and let the senses, I think they called it rotating the senses, and you just sort of go through the senses. It can be really interesting doing it in New York, actually.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So you one block, you're doing the sense of touch, the next block, the sense of hearing. Obviously, you have your eyes open the whole time, but you're not focused. You're only focused, to make sure you don't get hit by a car or bump into another pedestrian.
Yeah.
but then when you do switch to seeing,
Mhm.
how often are the eyes distracted by something in a window, or something on the side of a bus, an advertisement, and then the stories that go up from that. So
Mhm.
it's very, it's just a really visceral practice, and one that can be pretty revealing to people. And the idea of the difference between seeing and looking for many people is just, they never really thought about it.
Mm.
And what is the difference?
Yeah.
Um, one is receptive, the other is active, and we need them both. But very often we go from the receptive to the reactive, but to the active without even realizing it.
Mm.
And the moment we get into the active of looking, then it becomes a different experience, not a bad experience necessarily, but a different experience. And
Right.
the way the mind holds it is very different, I think.
Well,
So,
yeah, and I mean, I think when we're talking about the practice of guarding the sense doors in particular, the I mean the way that the Buddha described that practice is not to get caught up in the features and details.
mm,
That's the specific instruction he gives, is to, to guard the sense doors is to not get caught up in the features and details of the sense objects. The idea being, I guess, that um, ordinarily, oftentimes, this kind of mental proliferation arises by our getting caught up in these features and details. So it might be, if, I don't know, if we're talking about some post, political post on social
right.
media or on a newspaper, we get caught up in the features and details of all of what is being discussed, and we start analyzing them, and we start thinking about them, and we start proliferating around them, and because we've attended to these, and we're taking them as important. And of course, as you said, in many circumstances that can be useful. We
Yeah.
need to do that sometimes, but the point of the practice is to be aware that in many cases it's not useful, it's not helpful to us, that it's actually detrimental to get caught up in features and details of things that are not useful to us, that are harmful in some ways.
Yeah.
And so the ability here to, first of all, to be aware of that difference of when we should, step back from certain kinds of sense data, certain kinds of sense experience, and secondly, how to do that, how to then hold that, whether it's a view of some particular post online or whatever, how to have that enter our consciousness, as it were, without getting caught up in the features and details, while being able to sort of put the phone down, or
Right.
move on to something else, redirect the mind, like you were saying. I think that's the practice, at least as far as I can see it, in guarding the sense doors, basically.
Yeah. I Yeah, exactly. I think that it's fascinating. The more we talk about this, the way that um, social media has basically hijacked us, and uh, so the practice would be the moment that we are reading something, we notice our feeling about it, what feeling tone is arising. Right? We can notice the proliferation that's arising. Can we let all of that go and just come back to this moment?
Mhm.
Or are we carried away into something else?
Yeah.
And then if we are carried away, at what point do we notice that we've been carried away?
Mhm. Yep.
And so it really, I mean, it's a challenge, but it's what we're living with now. And we also, and I'd love, even when I'm doing a day long and I offer people, to hold their phones,
Mm.
to collect them and hold them until the end of the retreat, how relieved they are when how they don't want the phone back,
Yeah, yes, to
because
keep
they
it.
realize, and when it's a longer retreat, even more so. It's like, oh God, you know. And so I remember when I was on this month-long retreat with Tanisar and Kittisaro, we did this whole little kind of ceremony at the beginning of the retreat to let go of all of our devices, which we did, all of us, you know, and it was like recognizing, you know, what they have become.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the retreat, you know, sort of being really gentle with ourselves, you know, as we turn them back on, you know,
and looking at all those hundreds of messages in your email box or
well,
whatever.
there's that, and then there's also the news, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
oh
Oh, yeah.
God.
Yeah. God.
And so, yeah, I mean, this is the life we're living now, and it really, if you, I mean, for me, it's like, thank God I have this practice, that, you know, because otherwise, I mean, it's bad enough as it is. And if I didn't have this practice, I can't imagine how much worse it would be.
Well, yeah, I think part of it is, which is I think is kind of funny, is that you know, the Buddha talks about how we tend to relish both our loves and our hatreds. And I think and that's part of the problem, right? Is that, you know, is the way that we relish them, cling to
Right.
them, hold to them. And I mean, I think a lot of what we see online is this kind of relishing of hatreds, you know,
It
the
can
way
be.
that anger and hatred and enmity, division between people can really rile us up and keep us engaged. And that's part of what goes on. And the practice, at least in my life, has made me directly aware of the fact that that relishing has this real tinge of pain in it, of suffering, and that it's not a positive experience. It may be, we may say, in some circumstances, justified by the, you know, the news. We may say, you know, these are horrible things that are being done. What they are, they're horrible things. You know, but does it do us any good to, you know, live our lives continually bombarded by hateful and hate-filled messages? And I think the practice is to realize that's not healthy. It's not healthy for us. It doesn't help us be better people. It doesn't help us fix the situation really in the longer term. And so we have to learn, you know, when, you know, we're getting overly stimulated in a bad way, to shut the thing off, or, you know, turn our attention somewhere else.
Yeah.
And some media, some media outlets, they exist solely to foment this kind of division
Oh,
and
absolutely. Most of them
anger. Yeah, yeah.
these
Well,
days,
some
it
in particular,
seems.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think, you know, just in terms of practice advice, is like limit your exposure during the day.
Yeah.
You know, choose a time when you're going to be online, and not necessarily be online, but when you're going to like look at the feed,
Mhm.
you know, and recognize what's going on as you are looking at the feed. And choose wisely. You know, there's really like, okay, so what's the best way to work with this? You know, and recognize those moments when you're really completely hooked. I, you know, basically our devices have become it's just an addiction. You know, it's like instead of cigarettes, we have phones. You know, when we're like feeling somewhat out of sorts, we pick up the phone.
Yeah.
You know, and look at it, whatever. You know, and look at your apps. And of course, there's a whole movement now to get rid of smartphones. You know, just get a dumb phone.
I mean, they have
And
their uses, I will say this.
of
And
course,
not,
some
and
places
you
you
can,
have to have it.
yeah, and I mean, you know,
You
you can
definitely
try to
needed
kind of,
it in India. You had to have a smartphone.
I'm sure. No, in many places now it's
Yeah,
useful, but also, you know, you can try to think of substituting a more healthy use of your smartphone. Perhaps there's
right.
some other app that, you know, that is, you know,
Sure.
more, that is healthier for you, that you can spend your time on rather than, you know.
There are quite a few.
Yeah,
You
there are
can
quite a few.
meditate.
Yeah, you can meditate.
In
Yeah.
fact,
Learn a
there's
language.
there's one called Healthy Minds, which
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
comes out of the University of Wisconsin, you know, and it's like, and so, you know, you can balance it out, do your little doom scrolling, and then go to Healthy Minds or one of the other meditation
Right.
apps,
Yeah.
and just kind of,
Mhm.
yeah. So, yeah, big topic,
Big
big
topic.
topic. So,
And you don't want to have too much coffee, otherwise
then you're really like,
you're gonna be wired all day long with this stuff. But a cup of coffee in the morning is a good thing. That's where we want to start.
or 2 or 3, but
Or
that's
two
about
or
it.
three, but that's it. But then then we got to move on with the day.
It's really great to be back, and I realized, like, we started our 4th season, and we've had very few episodes, so we've got a lot of catching up to do. So the next few weeks, I'll be around. I hope you're around.
Yeah, I should be
And,
around. Yeah.
and we'll be back. And the coffee pitch, of course, was because that's how you can support us, by buying us a cup of coffee through the website,
Digging the Dharma.
diggingthedharma.com. And yeah, until next week, Doug, let's keep it going.
You got it.
Everybody else, keep digging the Dharma.
Keep digging that Dharma.
Take care.
You too.